podcast slash video for On My Terms. And I feel so freaking weird doing this right now because the whole setup it looks really odd. Like, I have a laptop, I have a light, my room is a mess, it's not clean at all, full disclosure, and like everything in life, especially from the first moment that I was born, legit. My mom actually told me the other day that I was also a very delayed baby and I wouldn't come out. And ironically, today is my birthday, which when you watch it, it will be my birthday. But when I'm filming this, it's not my birthday yet. But yeah, I am turning 24 and I'm so happy for those who are joining me and kind of getting a glimpse into one, who I am, and also what is On My Terms. One of the really big reasons why I wanted to start this is because one, you kind of see it happening already with everyone around the social media space. Everyone is really just wanting to put themselves out there and, start conversations based on their own perspectives, which I think is awesome because beforehand, I know I see people who I've known from college and schools doing their own thing, whether that's on social media, whether that's starting their small businesses. So those little things I think really helps me just learn who they are beyond from what I thought I knew who they were. And so I'm very excited and I'm very nervous. So I'm glad I'm recording this and also recording the audio because I've never been, oh my God, I'm also very sniffly, oh God. But yeah, so I wanted to come on here to first introduce to why I'm doing On My Terms and why I called my podcast On My Terms. What I hope that On My Terms kind of becomes, like my brand, is one, just being able to do the podcast, so for those who are audio listeners, to be able to tune in and hear, the crazy stories I want to share and like the new things I want to explore, but also at the same time for those who prefer video, right? Like being on video and having a digital platform for those to also view, and creating content around the things that interest me, which kind of gets to the point of On My Terms. The reason and how On My Terms started was kind of funny enough. The title that I plan to give this podcast and this video is The Existential Crisis of a 24-year-old. And it's kind of, you're wondering like, what the hell, like, are you okay? Like, are you going through it? And it's not that necessarily I'm going through it, but in the past couple of years, I've definitely evolved a lot as a person and really trying to find myself and living a life on my terms. One of the big things that really changed that for me and realizing how I wanted to live my life was graduating college. So 2 years ago, which is insane that it's almost going to be 2 years, I graduated from college as a first-gen woman, Latina, Mexicana, daughter of immigrants from a predominantly white institution. And, those 4 years were hella crazy, as I hope to share in the future with a couple of my friends, sharing that experience as first gen, because it was very character defining for me. I definitely was living a lot, going through a lot during those 4 years, just trying to figure myself out, just trying to figure out what I wanted out of life. And I definitely felt consumed by the labels that I had almost taken on while being on campus. You want to be able to be successful as a first-gen student, and you want to be able to prove yourself as the firstborn at that, right? And I felt like I constantly had to take on like 30,000 things in order to feel like I'm doing enough. And that we could have a whole podcast dedicated to that situation, and the dangers of overworking oneself to prove really, you kind of just stand there like, who am I proving this to? Like, who am I like doing this all for? And of course my parents were a huge component of me being, persevering through a lot of those things. But regardless of that, right, just really thinking through, how as I am a person, as a person, am I setting my own rules in life? And it wasn't until I graduated into college and legit, and I don't think it's talked about enough, which, I've seen a couple of platforms who have been starting to have these conversations, but essentially those who have chosen to attend college, and maybe even those who, right out of high school, face themselves with almost an existential crisis about who they are. What the hell are they doing? I mean, you see this even on TikTok, right? You see people, those who are well into their 20s, those who are well into their careers, very just like in this moment and stuck in this moment of, what the hell am I doing? Like, do I want to be stuck in a 9 to 5? Do I want to be stuck in this industry? And I kind of find myself in that place as well when I graduated, just because I didn't know where I wanted to go. Like, I thought I did. Like, I thought I had set my life up when I was in college. Like, you're like, yes, I'm gonna do this at this age, I'm gonna do that at that age, and really setting really high expectations for myself. And I think that I had to step back and go back to the drawing board of what I wanted life to be. That existential crisis right after college was not easy. Like, it was definitely something that took a long time to heal. It was a huge healing period because, and I don't know how many can relate to this, but when I was going to college, I feel like a lot of the things that was going on, I wasn't really paying attention to how they impacted me and my mental health, and just the way that I dealt with it. And I think once I stepped a foot outside of college, I realized that I needed to check myself first in order to move forward, because oftentimes there's like 30 different things going on when you're in the college space, and the last thing that you check on is you. Like, are you good? Like, will you be good for the next couple of days, after everything settles? And so because you graduate, whatever, and you're kind of confronted with this very scary silence almost, right, of everything kind of just like shutting down. Like, you don't have club meetings to go to. I was a varsity athlete in college, and you don't have practices, you don't have a routine, and it's like, and then you're also looking for a job, and it's like, what the hell am I doing? And so it was a scary time, and I think I wanted to be open about this, because both in my family and amongst friends and amongst mentors and all those who I've kind of gotten to know in my life, everyone kind of assumed that it was all okay, and it wasn't. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to acknowledge, and and then like trying to figure out how do you just even start with the healing process. And it's been, like I said, 2 years since I graduated, and I'm still in that process. Definitely way, 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 way better than I was 2 years ago, and even 3. And it all really took me pushing myself to say, you know what, like, I gotta really, really just hold reign to my own life. And sounds very cliche, but in the world that we live in, and especially in the world that the way that kind of after college is made to especially after college, and how you're kind of made to feel as if you have to have your life set up afterwards, it is daunting to even sit down and even think about what the next years hold. And so very ironically, there was this, I was part of a scholarship program at my colleges, and they asked us to, in our own words, describe our time at the college. And I have written, actually, it's funny because I have a board where I kind of wrote a quote of it. Darn it. I'm back. I'm gonna cut the part where I was running around looking for the book, because My room is a mess. But anyways, so how this quote came about was because, like I had mentioned, the scholarship program that I was part of had a senior book that they published, and we were supposed to fill out a bio and all that stuff. And in it, we were asked the question, what is a quote that inspires you? And this quote very ironically applies to why I started this whole thing, without even knowing it, and really how I came about with the word On My Terms. Well, the brand On My Terms. Well, the podcast On My Terms. So, but okay, so I'm gonna read the quote that I wrote in the book, and it's, in my words, one of my favorite quotes is from Frida Kahlo. I don't paint dreams or nightmares, I paint my own reality. We often always feel the need to enclose ourselves in a box because it would be easier for the world to better understand us. However, I find it important to always find yourself outside the box, breaking the norms and not feeling forced to act within the status quo. Sorry. I hope to continue living this mantra and always challenge myself to try something new. Throughout my 4 years, I have dove into things out of my comfort zone, and I will continue to push that boundary after college as well. And pushing that boundary will be on my terms, and I look forward to seeing where it takes me. So that, and it's that last sentence kind of, I found the book, I think a couple of months after I graduated, and I looked at that quote and I was like, holy crap, like after college, like I said, right, I was going through that healing process. I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with my life? I had a job, which was great, but it wasn't necessarily like where I wanted to be in terms of my career at the beginning. And fair warning, I think everyone has always said this, like the first job is not your ideal job. And if you do have your ideal job as the first job, props to you. But it definitely wasn't the case for me. And when the pandemic coming and like reflecting on like what did I wanted to do with my life, like I clearly wasn't super satisfied in just being in my current role. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to do something where I was pushing myself out of the comfort zone, just like I had said before, right? And that last line, like pushing that boundary will be on my terms, and I look forward to seeing where it takes me. That to me, that was very important because going into college, and not to say that the 4 years I did things that I didn't want to do, but I think that a lot of it was to keep up with this image that I was being successful, that I was doing X, Y, and Z. And I think that I also put like way too much on my plate in order to keep up with that that image, right? And I don't want people to think that, oh my God, like, who pushed you? Was it your parents? Was it like outsiders? And it's like, it wasn't really anyone other than me thinking that I needed to do it for others. I think, yes, there's always going to be parents influencing you to believe that you have to push yourself to an extremity and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I was able to graduate that I really opened up to my parents and to my friends and anyone who was part of that journey about, the importance of really checking up on yourself during really tough times. Because I think that we've been all, and I don't know what exactly it is, and I definitely would love to explore it more, but like, I think, well, capitalism, but in almost like, if you think about it like that, right, in a society where you're asked to continuously produce in order to keep up, and if you don't produce anything that is of value, then you're kind of stuck in the same place, and you deserve that, which is absolutely not the right way to think. And I think for me, it was like, okay, what the hell is going on with that? Like, we got to figure that out too, because I didn't want to, I think that I also correlated job with happiness, because my job, it was my passion, and therefore if I was doing the job that I wanted, then I would be happy. But that is also not the case. So for me, it was just about really deconstructing all these beliefs that I had thought in my head, and I don't think I ever talked to anyone about it. And so one of my goals with this platform is that to have these conversations, those conversations that sometimes we don't have a chance to even think about because we're so consumed with everything that's going on around us, especially those who are maybe even going through college and are feeling like they're not doing enough. I mean, I can only imagine what those who are in college are going through, or those who even don't choose to go to college. Because once I graduated, I was like, did I need to go to college? But I mean, there's a whole thing on that as well, because there's a value in higher education, but then there's trauma that is particularly students of color, BIPOC students, and anyone who it doesn't see themselves in these spaces just gets really uncomfortable with the fact that they have to force themselves to like this space just for the sake of proving society that they're worthy of a higher income, of a higher standard of living. And it's like, that shouldn't be how we view the world. And I think that sometimes also people, because it's become such a given, more or less, people also then use it to critique others. And I think that for me, also deconstructing that and reevaluating how I want to proceed in my future with my future kids, and giving advice to my siblings and family members. But all that to say, and I feel like I've been rambling a little bit, not getting to the point. But for me, on my terms, and what I hope that this brand helps others do, is understand that whatever life you choose to live, like you have an option, like maybe no, I mean you do, but whatever life you choose to live, let it be on your terms. Let it be because you decided that will make you happy, and really take away all the other external factors that might influence that feeling. Because what I notice is growing up, and growing up sometimes with social media, and like with just being a teenager, and growing up in an environment where society is often always influenced by the material and what you do have and what you don't have. I think that's easy for someone to then think that is what success and happiness looks like. But I think I'm just thinking of someone who kind of was like, nah, money and success and the material doesn't really mean anything. And I think it was J. Cole. So J. Cole had talked about, I'm not saying it verbatim, but I do recall him essentially saying something along the lines of, oh my God, my voice cracked. Saying something along the lines of, he had received his first big check and he bought a car, and then he realized like that didn't bring him any happiness. And so I hope that, through these conversations that I have with people that I want to bring on about their lives, I want them to also reflect on their question, like, are you living a life on your terms? And what outside of the external factors will dictate that, right? What in your soul, and it sounds really deep, like very spirituality, which I've another episode to dive into, but what really fuels you in the innermost core of yourself, without considering the material. And I think I joke along with my friends about this, but like, do you like ever want to just run away and live in the hills by yourself in a cabin? And like, people do sometimes, and we used to joke about that and saying that that's like not realistic. But I think for me, I always see myself at the end of the road, at the end of my life, looking back and being very proud of the life that I lived, but also living in a point in my life at that end point. And this is very morbid, which I'll talk a little bit more right now, a little bit later, but being in that point when the end comes, because the end is inevitable, sadly, and tragically, it's something that we as humans just kind of have to go through. So for me, it was reflecting about that point. What's the end point, right? not thinking about what it takes to get to that end point, but how do I want to feel at the end point? And so a lot of these questions that I pondered in my head during the creating process of this platform was these like existential crisis moments where you're like, what is life? What am I here for? And all that. And I dove into a little bit of spirituality, which I want to also dive into at a later podcast about what is spirituality when you take away the filter of popular media saturating it a lot for, views and clicks. What is the root of spirituality, and what does it mean for the future as well? But to get back to my point, for me, the reason that the creative process that led to On My Terms was I get the existential crisis, feeling like I just didn't know where I wanted to go in the direction of my life, and taking that process within, because I had gone to therapy right after college, which was honestly one of the best decisions that I've ever done in my life. I think therapy and mental health is often very stigmatized in the Latinx communities. And it was something that I was nervous to open up about to my own family. But when I did, the doors just opened wide about the conversations on mental health and really checking in on yourself and what that means, because no one ever did that when my parents were growing up and when their parents were growing up. Like, mental health wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't a thing. It was just, it was displayed out in the open, but people kind of maybe said, well, no, that's a drinking addiction, or no, that's a drug addiction, or no, that's a anger issue. And it's like, those were honestly just displays of what the inner stuff that was going on, and no one talked about, because it was very hush hush, and like, you can't talk about your emotions, you're being too emotional as a woman. And when I finally decided to when I finally decided to speak up about it, it was groundbreaking for my family. And I know that might not be the case for everyone, but one of the things that did for me was really start the healing process within our own family as well, because we opened up about open wounds and family relationships, and how to deal with those situations, knowing that sometimes people's actions aren't necessarily their intent, but it's often a reflection of how they're feeling towards you or towards themselves, and you have no control over that. And I think that in itself was like, okay, little by little I started feeling little by little I started understanding that this mantra that I wanted to live by on my terms was a process. So I started with the feeling lost, feeling like, how do I address this? Going to therapy and really talking and opening up my wounds about things that I've gone through and never really spoken about, because I wasn't allowing myself to be vulnerable, because I felt like I had to have it all together in order to be successful or prove that I was capable of it all. Like, it's almost like you're taking all these hits and you're viewed as more stronger if you come out more injured, right? Like, I don't know, like, it's almost like when you go work out, and if you're not sweaty, you didn't work out hard enough. If you don't have like pit stains forming under your shirt, if you don't have like sweaty hair sticking up into your forehead, you didn't do good enough at the workout or the practice or whatever. So it almost feels like that, like feeling like you aren't doing enough, when the reality is, like, everyone has their limits, and everyone also has to reflect on where they draw the line and where they allow things to move forward or not. But yeah, like, and one of the last things that I wanted to talk about with the On My Terms, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, was just this fear of death. And it's gonna get a little bit morbid, but one of the things that I've had since I was a kid, and I think that people, when they say, oh, what's your biggest fear? Like, people are like spiders and snakes. And listen, if I see one of those, I think I could live. Like, I will probably be freaked out, but I think I could do it. But one of the things that I did honestly fear was death. And it sounds very morbid, but I don't think that it's, I personally haven't seen it spoken about as much as I wish it could be, because I needed to hear more about how to deal with that fear. And that is the fear of death, right? It's the fear that, what is afterlife? And I know that there's gonna be people viewing this who know that I grew up Catholic. I did. And I want to dive into that in a different episode, but what I want to say about my experience with Catholicism is I did decide to step away from the religion just because of a lot of issues that were going on, both in personal interactions and then also with just the greater context of Christianity and the history behind it, and the history and the violence behind it. I grew up thinking that I knew everything of Catholicism. Like, I was like in there like, yes, Jesus was born, and no, not Jesus. Jesus was baptized in the River Jordan, and all these little things that I was so, because I grew up with that, that's part of my culture as being Mexican. But when I went to college, I really did start unraveling a lot of things about the history. And, my mom says that, college is telling you lies. And I'm like, but no, that's not, that's history. And it is, because I think that I've even heard it in the church. There is a history there, like that. No one can deny that. There's a history of violence there. And there's also a culture that exists within that space. But whatever the case is, I decided to step away with it because I just needed to. I felt like there was more that I wanted to explore. Like, I wanted to be really open-minded about my spirituality. I didn't want to go the atheist route, because that would drive me insane. And I mean, props to atheists. Like, I would love, actually, I think that might be cool to have a conversation with an atheist just to figure out like what their thought process is, because I would be really anxious with that. But okay, going back to it, the fear of death, I think, was always terrifying to me, right? Because you're just like, so what's supposed to happen to us when we're gone? And you have this fear of oblivion. And I'm not kidding, and I don't want to trigger anyone, so trigger about this, but like, I would get serious anxiety when I would think about it. Like, a pit of darkness would just overwhelm me. And I realized that I needed to find something that kind of guided me in whatever it is that I was going through, especially with like troubles and stuff like that. And because I had stepped away from Christianity, I wanted to find something different. Like, I was open-minded to it. And one of the things that I dove into was spirituality and the idea of the universe, just thinking of no higher entity, but rather just the universe working together in its own way and bringing to you what you needed to learn and what maybe you needed to work on. And then also astrology, which astrology is always controversial because people are like, oh my god, like, your zodiac signs shouldn't be your defining character. And I totally understand that, but I also do think that there's a validity in looking into astrology. But regardless of all that, I think that I allowed myself to just explore and leave my fear behind and not be consumed by it, because when I was going through a lot of this anxiety out of college and during college, that fear definitely drove a lot of it too. Like, I was just so anxious because I was like, why am I in college for? Like, what's all this for? And I really had to ground myself and understand that I didn't have to look up to something in order to feel like I had to live a purposeful life. Like, I realized that I had to look within in order to live that life that was on my terms, that life that was driven by my own passions, the things that made me happy. And also understanding that there are going to be moments where I'm not going to be happy. Like, I just have to kind of be okay and content. And I think that contentment itself is something that no one tells you about in terms of what the pursuit of happiness looks like. Because people when say, until I get a new car, I won't be happy. Until I get a new man, I won't be happy. Until I get I get to travel, I won't be happy. And I really had to like stop that thought process, because I wasn't living a life on my terms, because I was so driven by what's next rather than what's now. And I think with social media, we're constantly thinking about what's next, like, and I'm guilty of it. I'm not saying that I've been perfect, that I'm living, in the moment every day, but it's something that I strive for, and creating that mantra for myself has helped lead that process. And so that's why I want to create this platform for those who are still trying to figure out where they want to go in life. Like, what are their life plans? Like, how do they force themselves into force themselves into things that don't make them happy, and how do you stop yourself and the world around you, kind of, not, the world keeps going, but like, how do you kind of stop and reflect, even if it's for like 5 minutes in a day? How do you stop and reflect on what has happened in your day? Like, okay, I had water, I have a roof over my head, I have a job, and I have all this. All right, I'm good, I'm doing well. And I think those little moments in life are important in order to really continue that journey in life. And this journey is not over. I think that this platform itself is helping me in building out that journey, and still trying to figure out what is it that I'm still missing, or not missing, but like, what are some things that I could still work on, and what are some things that I haven't really dove in. What are the things that I haven't dived into? And so doing that conversation and just being a friend, almost through the screen and through audio, to whoever needs it, because heck, this pandemic has more than enough proven that sometimes this shit can be a little bit lonely, and just being in your own thoughts sometimes. And so to have someone to talk your ear off, I mean, thank you for letting me do that, and hopefully you're able to enjoy it. And I really do look forward to bringing in, so just to be fair, I won't be talking by myself every week as much as I enjoy doing that. Trust me, I have years of practicing in the bathroom talking to myself. But I think I am going to bring in a couple of people that inspire me, and who I think would inspire others to live a life on their terms, whether that's entrepreneurs, whether that's people jumping into their careers who may be like, the only woman of color in the space, or, they might be someone who's jumping into a business venture and never had, and is trying to figure it out at this point. Because I think that one of my goals with the guests is that I don't always bring people who've kind of already made it. I want to bring in people who are in that journey, because I think that there's an authenticity in those who are still in their journey. And I mean, to be fair, you could say that anyone at any point of their life is in their journey, but those who are just getting started, who are just experiencing those moments of fails and losses, right, and are pushing through all that, because I think it kind of helps others see that life isn't always about the highs. Sometimes there's going to be low moments, and there's sometimes going to be high moments, and there's sometimes going to be medium moments. And it's about just, hearing from others' experiences, and hopefully meeting people who, aren't like, listen, I'm not no famous Nancy out here. Like, I can't get you, I can't get you Oprah or Chris Evans, but I could get you people who are, are everyday people, people who are just living their life, and who have inspired me to live my life on terms, and hopefully inspire you. Don't forget, like and subscribe. Hey everyone, so this is Stacy, currently editing my first episode of On My Terms podcast. I wanted to just say thank you for taking time to listen to the first episode. And if you can't wait to hear more of the content, make sure to follow us. Well, follow me on Instagram and YouTube, where you could also find the video version of the podcast. You're able to hear the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also SoundCloud. So be ready for the journey we're both embarking on. And thank you again for taking a listen. I'm very excited to launch this, especially on a special day like my birthday. So happy 24th to me, and happy beginnings to On My Terms.